35%. That's how many independent pharmacies have closed their doors in Minnesota over the last 6 years.
Look, pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare professionals in America.
From mom and pop independents to big chain drugstores, this trend has a serious impact on healthcare across the country.
As of 2020, about 25% of the United States was a pharmacy desert. And we have every reason to expect that number to have only grown.
Independent pharmacies say they're being driven out of business by big corporations.
In the last part of our series on the state of American pharmacies, we look deep into the world of pharmacy benefit managers. In our third and final part, we're going to dig into how pharmacy closures affect healthcare.
You're seeing independent pharmacies just disappear across the country. They've vanished by the hundreds. And even some of the chain retail stores, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, many of them are closing as well, too.
Roughly 1/3 of the nation's pharmacies have closed their doors since 2010, according to research from USC and UC Berkeley.
If we keep closing these pharmacies, particularly in the rural areas, that accessibility to healthcare is going to suffer. And, you know, whether you're Republican, a Democrat, or independent, we all want the same thing. We want accessible, affordable, quality healthcare.
Depending on where you live, it may still be pretty easy to find a pharmacy, but other places where you live, it's becoming very difficult simply to get a prescription filled. We call those pharmacy deserts, and the pharmacy deserts in the United States are expanding. So more and more patients are finding it difficult to get that prescription filled.
Nearly half of all counties in the U.S. have at least one pharmacy desert, according to research from Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center. They define a pharmacy desert as a 10-mile area that contains no retail pharmacy. There's no one definition of a pharmacy desert. In fact, Hoey says there are a number of factors that can contribute to that portion of healthcare access.
You could have a pharmacy 2 miles away, which for most people that's pretty close. But if you don't have a vehicle, or you don't have, or you don't walk well, you have difficulty walking, 2 miles might as well be 100 miles. So they look at things like vehicle ownership. They look at not just distance away as the crow flies, but maybe there's an interstate between you and that 2 miles. Maybe there's a mountain between it.
We're increasingly creating a country with more and more medical deserts, and that includes a big portion of rural America, as well as urban areas, poorer neighborhoods in big cities.
The solution to pharmacy desert concerns goes back to part 2 of the series. In March, Alabama's House and Senate unanimously passed the Community Pharmacy Relief Act. It aims to curb the influence of pharmacy benefit managers by making sure they pay pharmacies no less than Medicaid.
We need oversight of PBMs.
If we are able to do something about PBMs, they're just going to make up for it somewhere else. That's why we've got to have, we've got to break these up, bust them up.
If these companies were busted up, we would see, I think, some change, because it wouldn't be feeding this monster in the way that it is now.
We need Congress to take action with the 2 biggest programs in pharmacy. One is Medicare, and one is Medicaid. And largely, the federal government has turned Medicare and Medicaid over to PBMs to run. Since they've done that, drug prices have skyrocketed, profitability of these companies has gone higher, and the burden on taxpayers has gone up. The Medicare program, the Part D as in David, Medicare program is run by the PBMs. The federal government turned over the program to the PBMs.
For now, PBM reform is shelved in the halls of the United States Capitol after it was omitted from the latest budget package. But 39 states' attorneys general have called on Congress to pass legislation similar to that of Arkansas, which banned PBMs from owning pharmacies in the state.
404 Media is reporting a hacker stole data from Telemessage, an Israeli company that sells versions of the Signal app to the U.S. government. The hack reportedly shows the vulnerabilities of an app gathering information from some of the highest-ranking officials in government. Reuters reports Telemessage is the unofficial version of Signal, the app used by former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Waltz created a group chat containing messages about U.S. efforts to attack Houthi rebels in Yemen that accidentally included the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic media outlet. Last week, President Trump ousted Waltz as National Security Advisor and said he would nominate him for U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, requiring Senate approval. On his Truth Social platform, the president wrote, "From his time in uniform on the battlefield, in Congress, and as my National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know he will do the same in his new role." Telemessage appears to have a similar interface and functions as Signal. 404 Media reports the unidentified hacker as claiming they had broken into Telemessage's infrastructure and intercepted some messages. 404 Media reports it was able to verify some of the information. The report indicates the hacker did not intercept messages from Waltz or anybody else in the administration. Signal is an encrypted messaging platform which focuses on privacy and security. Its messages are said to be scrambled and supposedly can only be decrypted by the sender or receiver. Telemessage can capture messages once they've been decrypted, so they can be preserved and stored. A Reuters report says those features can be useful for governments trying to retain documents, but can be a security risk if not implemented properly. A Reuters photograph captured Waltz appearing to use the Telemessage app at a recent cabinet meeting. In fact, a Signal spokesperson told Reuters the company, quote, cannot guarantee the privacy or security properties of unofficial versions of Signal. Telemessage's parent company is now in the process of rebranding the app as Capture Mobile. So far, no comment from the White House on the hacking report.
El presidente Trump dijo, queremos ayudar a México. Y para ayudar a México, pues queremos mandarles, entre otras, tropas o si es que lo necesitan. Y yo le dije, no, presidente Trump, eso no. Podemos colaborar en muchas otras cosas dentro del marco de nuestra soberanía y de la territorialidad que a cada uno de nosotros nos corresponde.
En otro tema, Presidenta, estamos a menos de...
El presidente Trump dijo mano dura a el tráfico de armas de Estados Unidos a México. Eso no se había oído nunca de un presidente de los Estados Unidos. Y es importante para México que se detenga el tráfico de armas, así como nosotros estamos trabajando muy fuerte para disminuir, detener el tráfico de fentanilo de México hacia los Estados Unidos y de otras drogas.
President Donald Trump's administration says it's going to pay immigrants in the United States illegally who've returned to their home country voluntarily $1,000 as it pushes forward with its mass deportation agenda. The Department of Homeland Security said Monday that it's also paying for travel assistance and that people who use their CBP Home app to tell the government they plan to return home will be, quote, deprioritized for detention and removal by immigration enforcement. Trump has made immigration enforcement a centerpiece of his campaign.
Our border is open and gushing. It's a big gushing wound.
But that is a costly, resource-intensive endeavor. The Republican administration is pushing Congress for a massive increase in resources, but also pushing people in the country illegally to, quote, self-deport.
But what we thought we'd do is a self-deport, where we're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from, and they have a period of time. And if they make it, we're going to work with them so that maybe someday, with a little work, they can come back in if they're good people, if they're the kind of people that we want in our company, industrious people that could love our country. And if they're not, they won't. But it will give them a path to becoming, to coming back into the country. If they miss that limit, they're going to be taken out of our country. And they will never get a path to come back in. And it'll be a much tougher process. And it's called self-deportation.
A handful of pro-Sudan demonstrators outside the International Court of Justice in The Hague on Monday. They were protesting against a decision by the top United Nations court to throw out Sudan's genocide case against the United Arab Emirates. The ICJ found it doesn't have jurisdiction in the case, although it noted deep concern about the spiraling violence in Sudan.
We are looking for justice. So justice will never stop in one place. We go further, and we will always be looking for our justice. So what's happening today, this is not the end of the game. We're going further.
Khartoum had accused the UAE of complicity in genocide in the ongoing civil war in Sudan through its alleged support for the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The UAE, which has denied the accusations, applauded the court's decision.
Hi, I'm Eve Young, Jerusalem Post economics and domestic affairs correspondent, here in the studio with Seth Franzman, the Jerusalem Post senior Middle East analyst. Thanks for being here, Seth.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the Houthis. Given recent U.S. operations against them, what are their capabilities now? And is Iran supporting these capabilities?
The Houthis control a part of Yemen, and especially a mountainous part. So one of their main attributes is that they can hide missiles and drones in mountains and caves. It makes it kind of difficult to get at their capabilities. But I think what's known is that for the last decade, they've stockpiled ballistic missiles that are of increasingly long range so they can reach Israel, as well as one-way attack kamikaze drones. All of this is basically Iranian technology that was trafficked to the Houthis, and then they basically expanded on it, found ways to manufacture it locally. They have, of course, tens of thousands of men with small arms, but their capabilities are not that strong. But we've seen that, ballistic missiles can wreak havoc.
Is there merit? Should we be concerned in Israel about the Houthis' recent threat to shut down Israel's airspace by continually bombarding the airport?
The Houthis have no way to actually shut down Israel's airspace, but as I think we saw with the ballistic missile that fell next to an airport, I think most commercial airliners feel that if there's even a tiny % chance that your plane will be knocked out of the air by a missile or your people on the ground will be killed, they won't take that chance. So in a sense, the Houthis can achieve a lot, more bang for the buck, basically because if you just create a tiny threat, like a 0.5% chance of a missile falling on an airplane, lots of people will, in a sense, create a soft boycott of Israel. So it's not that Israel can be militarily defeated, but it can be very embarrassing. And, of course, you can have casualties. If one of these rockets gets through or shrapnel falls, people can die. So I think it's that they play off the small percentages, and that's why it's an extreme threat.
Does Israel have the capability to really deter the Houthis, fight the Houthis, and damage their capabilities? What are we working with here?
I think it will be difficult for Israel because we have to remember Saudi Arabia, which is much closer to the Houthis, on a big country, a wealthy country with Western weapons, just like Israel, like F-15s and things. They fought, a 7-year war against the Houthis, and the Saudis didn't win. So the fact is that if the Saudis couldn't do it and they couldn't defeat these kind of penniless tribesmen in the mountains, it will be difficult for Israel. Israel's thousands of kilometers away. It's not easy to wage a long-range campaign like that. Israel isn't going to do some sort of D-Day type invasion of Houthi land. I think the past has proven that it's very difficult to deter them and defeat them. And so someone will have to think of other out-of-the-box ways of thinking if they want to achieve that.
Any kind of ideas of out-of-the-box options that exist?
I mean, some people have suggested that a direct threat to Iran might get the Iranians to give the Houthis a call and say, hey, listen, calm it down. Another way to, perhaps would be to find ways to track the supplies. Where are the missiles coming out from? Use big data or AI, whatever. You track where the missiles are going in and out of, find the caves, find the rat line of the supplies and get it back to wherever those supplies are and blow up the propellant, blow up the missiles, blow up the solid fuel and the liquid fuel. So go after it that way. Or assassinate one of the leaders. I mean, there's all sorts of ideas out there probably. The question is, does anyone actually want to try to do it?
Great. Seth, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Tensions in the skies over Syria have escalated dramatically as Israeli and Turkish military aircraft found themselves in a direct face-off this weekend. And according to both Turkish and Israeli media outlets, this confrontation unfolded when Turkish F-16 fighter jets reportedly entered Syrian airspace and started shadowing Israeli warplanes conducting a heavy round of airstrikes. And these Turkish jets, by the way, are said to have issued warning signals demanding the Israeli aircraft withdraw immediately. A claim reportedly dismissed by the IDF. Despite that denial, Turkish media outlets claiming the incident took place during one of Israel's most aggressive bombing campaigns in Syrian territory since the collapse of Bashar al-Assad in November last year. And targets of the Israeli strikes, according to various reports, included pro-Turkish militia groups in northern Syria, such as the Sultan Murad Division and the Suleiman Shah Brigade. To counter Israel's air operations, Turkish fighter jets also allegedly activated electronic warfare measures, jamming Israeli radar systems and sending repeated deterrent signals. Turkey in the past has publicly demanded that Israel cease all military actions inside Syria. In a statement, the IDF said it had executed precise strikes targeting weapon depots, missile sites, and anti-aircraft installations across Syria and vowed to persist with these missions to neutralize any emerging threats. The IDF also released a video of these airstrikes. Turkey has been working to establish a long-term foothold at several strategic air bases in Syria. The T4 air base in Homs and another site in Hama have reportedly seen deployments of Turkish drones and advanced air defense units. According to Israeli media outlets, Israel fears that assistance from Ankara could enable Syria to rebuild its military arsenal, enhance its missile range, and bolster its southern defenses, all of which could severely compromise Israel's security perimeter. In March, Israel is believed to have launched a missile strike on the T4 air base just hours before a Turkish military team was scheduled to arrive for an inspection. That attack destroyed vital infrastructure, including the air control tower and key runways. You see, the skies over Syria are now more crowded and more dangerous than ever as regional powers maneuver for dominance. With both Israel and Turkey refusing to back down, the risk of a larger military confrontation looms on the horizon. Shifting focus for now, Israeli leaders have approved a plan focused on capturing all of Gaza following nearly 19 months of continuous warfare and relentless attacks on the Palestinian territory. Israel has decided to intensify its military efforts. According to reports, Israel's security cabinet has endorsed a plan to seize control of the entire Gaza Strip for an indefinite period. What is the plan, you ask? It reportedly outlines efforts to capture and hold territories, and it aims to prevent Hamas from distributing humanitarian assistance, which Israel claims only bolsters Hamas's grip on Gaza. And the plan also includes conducting powerful strikes against Hamas targets and will be implemented gradually. If executed, this plan could mean a broadened Israeli operation in Gaza, potentially worsening the already critical humanitarian situation. Cabinet ministers finalized the plan in an early morning vote on Monday, just hours after the Israeli military announced plans to mobilize tens of thousands of reserve soldiers. Prime Minister Netanyahu's administration aims to increase pressure on Hamas to release hostages and negotiate a ceasefire favorable to Israel. And according to officials, the new plan has been designed to help Israel achieve its military objectives against Hamas. Since the breakdown of a U.S.-brokered truce between Israel and Hamas in mid-March, the Israeli Defense Forces have launched fierce attacks on Palestinian territories, resulting in numerous casualties. According to Israel, it controls a substantial portion of Gaza, but even prior to the ceasefire's collapse, Israel had cut off all humanitarian aid to Gaza, including essentials like food, fuel, water. It triggered what is now considered the worst humanitarian crisis in nearly 19 months of the war. In fact, discussions have been going on with various countries regarding a controversial plan attributed to President Trump. It involves relocating Gaza's population under the guise of voluntary emigration. This proposal has drawn criticism from both European allies and the Arab world. The thing is, for weeks now, Israel has tried to heighten pressure on Hamas to encourage more flexibility in ceasefire talks. However, international mediators have found it challenging to facilitate any new agreement, as Israel's tactics have not exactly shifted Hamas's negotiating stance. The previous ceasefire was intended to set the stage for negotiations to end the war, but this goal has repeatedly stalled in discussions. Israel maintains that it will not agree to cease hostilities until Hamas is defeated, while Hamas insists on reaching an agreement that de-escalates the war.
Welcome back, America. So if they got these ICBMs, which they will, unless we stop them, they're going to have ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, and they get these nuclear warheads, which they will, unless we stop them. They'll be able to hit the United States at some point, but they'll also be able to blackmail us, create economic havoc, cut off certain navigable waters, make threats. And what do we do then? Now they have nuclear weapons. What do we do then as a practical matter?
Yeah, if passed as prologue, we'd have very limited options, which is why it's an imperative for not just this administration, but successive U.S. administrations for them not to obtain a weapon. They would functionally operate under a nuclear umbrella, meaning the consequences of taking any action against regional terrorism, disruption to trade, as you point out, which is our vital national security interest, and the heartbeat of the global economy, whether we like it or not, all of that would be thrown into the hazard. And to your point, in terms of development of a nuclear armed ICBM capable of reaching the United States, most estimates say they're 12 months out, but our ability to guess, of course, is been an imperfect track record, to say the least. We've never been able to successfully anticipate a partner, ally, or adversary developing a nuclear weapon. Our track record is 100%, and it's a failure. And so we should be extremely cautious about estimates, but the risk is real. I would say, too, that they only back down when confronted with force. The myth of a regional war as a result of it is just that. Iranian and Obama-era talking points facing a false dichotomy. When confronted with force, they back down, and that is the 4-decade history of the regime.
And aren't they in the weakest position, really, they ever have been in terms of a military strike? If the president wants to take that position, it won't only get worse and much more difficult as time goes on?
There's no question. Not only was Iran fundamentally weak all along, as Israel pointed out in response to the May and October missile strikes, drone and cruise missile attacks against them, also the largest use of ballistic missiles from one state against another, and another reason why we would believe that they might use nuclear weapons if they had them. But it certainly points out that as Israeli strikes indicated that it can be done, war doesn't result, and that we can, in fact, have freedom of action and operational flexibility inside of Iranian airspace if we need to do so. They are a patient that has been anesthetized. Operations can commence at much lower risk as a result of it. And with Hezbollah and Hamas now nearly eliminated, we now have greatly diminished the capacity of them to respond, and that deterrence capacity is eliminated. And with Syria falling and the land bridge connecting to Hezbollah, they are at certainly the weakest position they've been in at least 3 decades.
And the response to you, Robert Greenway, as the response to so many smart people who are conservatives, who are Republicans, who've been looking at this through their experience and so forth, is, oh, you must be a warmonger. Oh, you must support forever wars. In other words, you get cliches, you get slogans. You really don't get substantive, knowledgeable responses that dissuade or in any way significantly challenge what you're saying. In other words, what you're saying is a fact. It's unequivocal. It's not debatable, which is why President Trump is saying we've got to stop them from getting nukes. And yet others are out there acting like, well, that's just because you're an ideologue and an old time. Is that what you are? You're a warmonger? Is that why you're concerned about this?
Well, after 6 years of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm not enthusiastic about anymore or sending U.S. blood and treasure abroad. But I don't think that's what's required. I don't think that's what would result. And again, 4 decades of history have demonstrated that Iran will back down only when confronted with force. They accelerate their aggressiveness when they meet weakness, and that's the point. And so I hope that we won't flinch, and I'm sure President Trump understands the Iranians full well and will not. The only acceptable amount of enrichment for the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism is 0.
Yeah, and you, as many others, are literally trying to defend America, defend our ally Israel, defend the West is really what we're up against. Thank you, my brother. You take care of yourself.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mark.
We'll be right back.
insane. Look at this towering thunderstorm right here, producing a tornado warning all the way in Vernon County. This is absolutely wild.
Solar system. orillas del río. Por la quebrada.
Şöyle güzel.
Саш!
Ох ты, ёптать, нихуя себе.
Нифига,
И вот так, и вот и все, и ты на той стороне. И ты на той стороне. Мужик. Эй!
Мужик! Уходи!
Трещина пошла! Охуеть! Не, пойдем отсюда.